Hey everybody, welcome to Color Blending Basics Part 1. So tonight, you guys, this is the first live video. I do have all of the previous videos, bonus videos up to this point. I will have those posted. It covers cleaning our piece, how to pick your primer, as well as working with some Dixie mud for repairs. So all of that has been compiled and is in a series of 3 videos. And those are all bonus videos to get you up to the point that we are at now. So tonight, you guys, I do have some people who joined the class, but no one has joined the group yet. So I'm going to be all alone tonight here on the live, but that's okay. Hopefully I will have some people who have joined by Wednesday and they will be live with me. I do have one other member of the group, and I know that she's not going to be here tonight as well. Outside of that, like I said, everyone else who has paid for the class has not joined the group yet. But we're going to go ahead and get started, you guys. So tonight we are going to be covering our resin molds, how to make those, how to apply them to your furniture. We are going to be doing a raised stencil, and we will get started with our blending. So we're going to start off with our resin molds. So I'm assuming everybody is going to be watching this on replay, you guys. Hashtag replay. Whatever you watch. And if you have any questions, just post them in the comments. I will be monitoring the group. Even after this week, when the group is over, you will still have access to all of these classes in one place. And you are welcome to message, email me, post in the comments, anything there. So tonight we are going to be pouring one mold. It's going to be going on this bottom section here. I'm going to go ahead and pop you guys down so that you can see what we're doing. And I am using an Alumilite fast cast resin mold. And I will go ahead and post a picture. You can pick it up at Hobby Lobby. I personally, it doesn't look like the containers from Hobby Lobby, but that's the picture I'm going to show you. I buy mine by the gallon. So this is actually what the gallons look like. And this is directly from Alumilite. You can see I've ran some in-person classes using this. So I'm almost out here. This stuff lasts forever. What you buy at Hobby Lobby comes in 8 ounces. So you get 8 ounces of part A and 8 ounces of part B. They do expire after 1 year. Mine is expired, but I keep on using it and I've had no problems. So I'm going to pop you guys down so you can see exactly what we're doing. And like I say, I will post a picture of that product so you don't necessarily have to remember it here. Let me just move this so you can see everything. So this fast cast resin, it is white and it does cure in 10 minutes. And this is what you want to use for your furniture molds. You can use the 24-hour resin, however, and that's a clear resin. However, it is much easier to use this 10-minute resin. You don't have to worry about air bubbles like you do with the 24-hour resin. It's super easy, and you're going to be able to, if you want a lot of molds on your piece, you're going to be able to pretty much pour them back to back to back. So first we're going to talk about the molds. These are redesigned with Prima molds. This one is actually a new release by Katja. It's called Enlightened Etchings. And we're going to be, I'm going to pour both of them, but we're going to be using this one right up here to put at the bottom of our piece. So like I said, it comes in 2 parts, part A and part B. Another great thing about this 10-minute resin is you do not have an odor. You can use it indoors. You don't have to worry about PPE or, the protection gear. I don't know exactly what the PPE stands for. I can't quite remember. Normally this yellow will look clear in the one that you purchased, and that's a great thing. Still works whenever it's cloudy looking. I pour it into these smaller containers out of my gallon sizes, so it's just easier for me to mix up. You are going to use an equal part of part A and part B, so I'm just using these little small measuring cups here. If you don't have measuring cups, you can use little Dixie cups and you can weigh it on a scale. If you are using the 24-hour resin, I would recommend weighing it because your equal parts have to be a little bit more accurate than does this 10-minute resin. This 10-minute resin, you guys, is so easy to use. Normally I do wear gloves just because you can get a little bit sticky on your hands, but it's not a big deal. And I'm actually going to pour enough in here. I'm going to pour about 25 milliliters in. Because I'm going to make enough so that I can pour this mold in this mold. I may have some extra left over. And if I do, I'll probably just, I'm going to get another mold out just to make a little bit extra. We'll have this one. So you can see the white that it turns there. So now I'm going to take my part B and I'm going to put the same amount in this little cup here. So this is my part B. Like I said, normally this will be more yellow. And I'm going to kind of put them up next to each other just to make sure they're close to equal. I don't have to be perfect. I think I might need a little bit more of my part A here. It doesn't have to be perfect with this 10-minute resin, so nothing to worry about there. So I typically use these little silicone cups because I pour a lot of molds. But if you don't have those, you can use a Dixie cup to mix this up in. So you can leave these sit like this, it's fine. Nothing is happening now, but once I pour them together, that's gonna start the process. So once I do pour them together, I need to be pretty quick. I also have some silicone mixing sticks. If you don't have these, I used to use popsicle sticks. Those work well. You know, really anything. You could even use a spoon, but I don't particularly like a spoon because it's harder to scrape around the edges and in the corners. So I would probably recommend either something like this or a popsicle stick. So now in my little cup, I'm just gonna go ahead. And by the way, you have a minimal amount of work time with this, so you don't wanna pour too much at once. But I'm gonna go ahead and pour these in. I have about 2 minutes once they touch each other to stir and pour before they will start to cure a little bit. So now that I have both parts in, you can see it looks a little cloudy. So you're gonna start to stir. And like I said, I wanna complete this step within 30 seconds. It's gonna get quite a bit more milky. You can see it there. However, once it's ready to be poured and nice and mixed up, you're gonna feel a little bit of heat through the cup itself, and it's typically going to clear up a little bit, so it won't look quite as cloudy. Now my part B was a little bit cloudy to begin with, so this may not clear up as much as it normally would, but I can feel it start to warm up, and it is clearing up slightly. It's not quite as milky looking. All right, perfect, but I can feel that heat. I know it's stirred up well, and you can see it has cleared up a little bit from what it was. So I'm just gonna set that down, and you want to quickly pour because really at this point, you only have about 1.5 minutes before it's going to start to cure. Just want to make sure that it's all filled up. There we go. We're going to go ahead and pour this one as well. I may not have enough even to fill this though, and I don't. And there's no set amount there's no exact amount that is going to fill every mold. You have different details in the molding, and as well as you have, various mold depths. So it's really just experience, getting to know. Usually that 25 milliliters of part A and then part B would fill a whole mold for the most part. And I've actually moved this around a little bit, so this is pretty well filled in. So at this point, I don't want it to fill over the top because then it'll be bubbled over. It's harder to glue on. So I'm just going to take this, and you want to do this within that same amount of work time. I'm just going to flatten it out. Actually, I need to rub it this way on this particular mold. That's just taking any excess off the top that would cause it to bubble. In this case, I'm going to move it over to this bottom mold though, and just run that across. So that way I know my mold is going to be nice and flat on the back. As soon as this starts to cloud up though and turn white, like you see right here, you want to stop messing with it. Do not touch it any longer. I'm going to go ahead and set an alarm because I want to demold this while it's still movable and workable. Hey Siri, set an alarm for 8 minutes. Hey Siri, set an alarm for 8 minutes. So the reason I'm setting that alarm, you're going to be able to look at this and tell by the feel and by the look of it whenever it is completely ready to go and demold. With these molds, they are silicone based, they're heat safe, up to, I think it's 500 degrees. So you can use them for food, they're food safe. So you can use them for food molds, you can use them for these resin molds, you can use air dry clay. Air dry clay is not my choice though, just because it does not give you a consistent experience. That's why I prefer resin. So we're just gonna let this go, and I'm actually gonna raise you up a little bit because we are gonna start talking while this is going. We're gonna make use of that time, and we are going to talk a little bit about, I just wanna be able to see you and then we'll drop you back down. We're gonna talk a little bit about blending and color theory, and how to pick your colors to blend while we let this dry up. So this is a color wheel, and let's see, let's work with this side. This is a color wheel. When you are picking colors to blend, you are going to pick colors that are next to each other and colors that are different tones and shades. So this side of the color wheel is showing you colors if you use white to change them. So any of these tones or shades running down here are going to be fine. Those would blend really well together. They would be easy for a beginner to blend. Like say, for example, this color and this color right here. Very close in shade. They're going to be easy to blend together. When you take this color and you go around and you want to say blend it with yellow, those are farther away from each other, so they're going to be slightly more difficult to blend. The back of the color wheel, so that side we were looking at are shades of white, colors tinted with white. These are colors tinted with grays and blacks, so they get darker. So let's say you're looking at the color wheel and you're looking at blue-green here, and you see this color all the way down here, and then you flip it over, you find your blue-green here, and you see this color all the way down here. So this is the lightest it's going to get shaded with white. Over here, it's the darkest it's going to get shaded with black or gray, either one. So if you try to take this color and blend it with this color, because they're very far away from each other, that's going to be a more difficult blend. So black and white is a difficult blend. They're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that complementary colors, and those are colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. So you have blue and orange. Those are directly across from each other on the color wheel. Those are complementary colors. If you try to blend these type of colors, you're not going to be able to. They're going to turn to mud. So you just want to be cognizant of that when you're picking your colors to blend. If you're new to blending, I would either stick with shades that are beside each other on the color wheel or close enough, 2 or 3 shades different on the color wheel, or up and down here on the color wheel. Those are going to be your easiest colors to blend if you're new to blending. Complementary colors, you want to stay away from blending those because they're going to give you dirt, which is nice though when you're going for an age finish, but that's not what we're doing. That's not even what we're talking about here. Or a layered finish. Complementary colors are great. So you guys, if you're not familiar with this, you can pick out the color wheel. It tells you all the information on here so you can know whether your colors are in harmony or if they're contrasting. But this is how you pick your colors to blend. And this is going to give you an idea of how easy it is to blend certain colors. So tonight we are going to be, and I may come back to this at some point, but tonight we are actually going to be blending Tea Rose, which is this beautiful kind of dusty pink color, and Buttercream. So they're not too far apart on the color wheel. These are great for beginners. And you can kind of see because this would be considered a shade of white. And this Tea Rose here is going to be considered a shade. So you can see how close they are. To give you an example, these are going to be easy because Tea Rose is probably between these two colors right here. And we're working with Buttercream, which is almost a white. So it's basically right here on the color wheel. So they're just a couple shades apart. So this is an easy blend and it's easy if you are a beginner. So you definitely want to keep that in mind because blending does take a little bit of practice. And I may, like I said, reference that color wheel back again, but I just wanted to kind of give you that understanding of how to pick your colors. All right, you guys, so let's see. I'm going to pop you back down. Well, actually, I don't even need to. I'm going to show you where we are. I can still feel the heat a little bit on this mold. It is pretty much totally white, but if I feel it, it's still a little bit tacky over here. So I'm just going to test it out. And the reason I'm going to test it out, I am putting it on a flat surface, but I want to bend it up a little bit and kind of make my own shape with it. So I want to demold this while it's still really flexible before it gets super hard. So when I start to demold it, all I'm doing is bending my molds back like this, and it looks like it's going to demold pretty easy. You guys, this cured really quick. My timer hasn't even gone off. So, 10 minutes is just kind of an estimate. I am demolding it relatively slowly because it isn't 100% hardened and cured, but I need it to be flexible like this. You can let it sit in here. We'll demold this one later so you can see how it looks. We're not using that one. I just wanted to go ahead and pour it. Because you can pour these molds ahead of time and use them. So you see where I flattened it out to make sure this was super flat, no bubbles, so it would glue on nicely. You can see how I kind of have this film over the edge. Well, provided you're removing this quickly after it's cured, all you have to do is use your fingernail. You can also use an X-Acto knife, but so my timer just went off. It was just now 10 minutes. So I'm just peeling off this excess here. Once your mold really fully hardens, it's a little harder to pull off. It's not quite so soft and easy. But that's another reason I like to demold early, just because it's easy to fix that. I don't have to worry about using an X-Acto knife. So you guys see how super flexible this is? I can glue it on anything, but I can feel it hardening up as I'm going. So what I want to do is come over to my piece here, and I kind of want to bend this up, I think. Maybe stretch that out. Maybe not. Okay, actually, yeah, I think I'm just going to bend it up a little bit, curl it around, and put it right here in the center of this. Actually, I may go down a little lower, maybe right here. Yeah, I think that's a little more pleasing to the eye there. So what I'm going to do, let me pop you guys back down. And we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to use Titebond Quick and Thick here. I'm terrible with letting this close up. But the reason I'm using this kind of glue other than the regular Titebond glue is this one dries a little bit faster. And not only does it dry a little bit faster, it also is drip resistant. So that's really nice because as your glue dries, a lot of times you'll get these little drips and you have to constantly clean those up as you're going along. You can't paint it right away because the glue will drip will continue to drip for hours. So if you paint it right away, it doesn't quite work out very well, because that glue is just continuously coming out. I have used that a lot in the past. Not the Quick and Thick, but just the regular Titebond wood glue. But I do prefer this when it's available. So here we go. I'm going to pop you guys back up now that we have that glue on there, and we're just going to put this on. So sometimes these molds are a little bit heavy. If that is the case, then you do want to, I want to center this and move this a bit. So if that is the case, or if you're moving them too much out while they're still curing, you may want to tape them down just so that it will hold the place while they continue to harden. But I think, and I will do that because I'm really curling up these edges. You just want to push it down all the way around to make sure that once we paint it, it looks like it came on this piece. You don't want any gaps around the edges. Now, if you are going to put a mold on after, I want to move this over a little bit to the right. If you are going to put a mold on after it's, been sitting out for 24 hours since you demolded it, it's going to be very hard and stiff, and you'll see that once we just demold this other part. If you need to make it flexible and movable again, I use a griddle. If you don't have a griddle though, I have one designated specifically for molds. If you do not have a griddle, you can heat it in the microwave. It doesn't get quite as flexible as if you're heating it on a griddle. I have never boiled it, but I have heard of people who have boiled them to get that flexibility to return. I just want to make sure this is nice and even. And in this case, this glue is taken over pretty well. So even though I have twisted it and moved it, I don't think I'm going to need to tape it. But I do want to remove some of that excess glue from around the edges. So typically you want to take, not a good paintbrush. You want to take an older paintbrush and then just dip it in water. This is the easiest way to get off that excess glue. You're going to dip it in water and you're just going to come around the edges and wipe it off. You're going to want to get this glue off of the brush though. So I've got a little bit of excess. It's just going to give you a nice clean look. So you can see where it's taken the glue off the edges. Now, if I'm putting a lot of molds on a piece too, I pour them back to back and I apply them at the same time so that way it's a smooth process. Because there are many pieces, you can look at my regular business page, there are many pieces where I don't know, I've applied over probably 30 molds on some pieces. It just depends on the piece. And because they do get hardened so quickly in those situations, I do keep them just sitting on a griddle at 250 degrees so I can keep them flexible when I'm working on a lot of molds. On this piece, I think I'm just adding this one mold. For the sake of the class, I consider doing this border and putting it all the way around, but for the sake of the class, we really just didn't have enough time for that. And I'm already fitting so much in 6 hours. You'll have quite a few bonus videos. All right, perfect. So that's all on. I've got the edges cleaned up. Everything has adhered really well around these edges. I'm just double checking that. So now let's say I didn't get this, top part up here stuck down. What I would do to resolve that situation, which I don't think I'm going to have that problem. Sometimes when you put the first coat of paint on though, just like, when you go back and watch the prep videos, just like on some of these areas, sometimes you don't notice it really until you put the paint over it and then it becomes more evident. But that's all there is to it with the molds. Let's see how hard this one is. So this one's still a bit flexible. It hasn't completely hardened yet. I'm going to leave it in the mold. As far as the cleanup on these goes, on the molds themselves, I've tried a few things like putting it in the freezer. That'll take candle wax out of a jar. Stuff like that. There's nothing easier. You just peel off your excess and put it in the trash. That's all there is to it. So like I said, that's it for our molds. Let me go ahead and put this stuff away. And we are going to move on to the raised stencil. So raised stenciling is like one of my favorite things to do. It's such an easy way to really transform the look of a piece, take it up another notch, and really make it stand out and be unique. And that's also why we are not going to be putting the first coat on the sides though tonight, because I wanted to do this raised stencil with you guys live. And that's the last step in our prep. Just want to make sure, make sure my ends are okay. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and spin this around to the side because I am doing the raised stenciling on the side. I'm just double checking because like I said, I have several people that just had not joined the group yet, which is why I'm live by myself tonight. And I was just checking to make sure that I did not receive any, actually I may have. I was checking to see. All right, bear with me for just a moment here. Normally I wouldn't do this if anybody was live with me, but since they're not, I do have someone that's attempting to log in. So let me just take a quick look. Actually, guys, I'm going to continue on. I will go back and deal with that. I would love to have someone live with me here. I kind of want to take a quick look and see if I have any requests at least to join the group. I'm just going to see if I can go in and add her right quick. And I'm actually not showing any requests still to join the group. So I'm going to go ahead and finish with this live. We're only about 35 minutes into it. And we will go from there. Sorry about that. If you're watching on replay, you'll be able to fast forward right through that until I start talking again. So like I said, we are going to move on to the raised stenciling. And it's really odd, you know, let me just tell you, while we're moving on to this, I was hacked whenever I lost the class. My Facebook page was hacked. It didn't affect the ability to purchase the class or anything like that, but it did affect the group itself that the class was being held in. And I really just got back access to go live last week. I considered postponing the class, but I didn't. And I think that's why some of this is happening right now, but I haven't. And like I said, I sent out reminder emails, and honestly, the person who just emailed me, I don't even have them as purchasing the class. So I'm really not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what's happening with that, though. Like I said, I don't even have them as purchasing the class. But like I said, this class will be available even after the lives are over, because all of this will be located here for your access. I just won't be live, but I will be available for questions and everything else. So the raised stenciling, we are actually going to be using another new release. This is also Katja from Redesign with Prima, and we are going to be using the, it's called a Nisa stencil. So this is a Mylar stencil. I do believe it's 10 millimeter, so it's still a fairly small one. Anything between 7.5 and 10 millimeter, those are just regular stencils, but they're great for doing raised stencils. There's also thicker stencils available specifically for this that'll give you quite a bit more. They almost raise up about that much, but you can see how thin this is. So it's a very slight raised stencil, but it makes a big impact still. So clearly you can see this stencil is larger than the area we're going to be putting it in. So there's a couple ways to combat that, and it's really your preference. Bear with me for just a minute. I just got to get a quick drink. There we go. So there's a couple ways to deal with this. If you're wanting a perfect stencil, meaning it's going all the way to the edge and it's just perfect all the way around, the best thing to do, or the only thing to do really, is to cut your stencil for the size of the area. And there's a lot of times that I will actually do that, because a lot of times it's a standard size on furniture for the area. So almost all furniture is going to have a similar depth to it. You're looking at anywhere from 12 to 18 inches, depending on what type of furniture it is. So a lot of times I do have several stencils that are cut, and I can just lay them in these areas and it's perfect. If they're slightly smaller, that's fine too, because you can move it around a little bit. But this is a brand new stencil. I don't really want to cut this one up yet. Also, with a raised stencil, it's going to look really evident whenever we do it. but you don't always have to run it all the way to the end, because when you are painting over it, a lot of that is, you're not really going to notice that it's not all the way to the edge. So it's not really a huge issue. And you're going to see what's going to happen once we start doing closer to the edge. But I want to go ahead and just lay this out kind of where I want it to start here. And we're going to tape it down. This is going to be imperfect. I want to stress that, because I cannot lay this flat. And these stencils are not, they're not flexible enough to really just make that 90-degree turn and, you know, tape out. So you really just want to be a little bit careful when you're doing this. I just want to make sure that I'm lined up and I'm straight here. So I've got the edge here and here. So now I'm running straight up and down. I'm going to push this all the way in because I do have a little tape spot at the bottom. And I want to make sure it has enough give to flatten out before I tape it down there. So it looks a little bubbled now, but when I push it in, it's going to be more flat. So there's a lot of different material that you can use to make a raised stencil. My favorite is Dixie Mud by Dixie Belle. And this Dixie Mud comes in 3 different colors. You have brown, white, and black. You do want to store this in the refrigerator. And it is kind of thick and pasty. Let me just kind of show you what it looks like here. So you can kind of see how thick it is. So this is my favorite material to use for a raised stencil. You can also use like for example, we have sea spray, which you can mix with paint to thicken up your paint. It's a texture additive. You can use that to do raised stenciling as well. That's probably my next favorite method, but I only use that method if I decide to do a raised stencil after I have already painted. That's not, you can get it thicker, but it's not quite as smooth and as creamy and as easy to apply as the Dixie Mud is. You can also use like different plaster additives and stuff like that. I have never used those. I have seen people who have, but again, it's just not as easy as the Dixie Mud. The Dixie Mud is the easiest and it's definitely cost effective as well. So that's why this is my medium of choice. You can apply it in different ways. There's all kinds of different ways that you can apply it. My favorite way to apply it, and what I find for me to be what I get the best results with, this is actually just, this comes in silkscreen stencils. It's a little tool that comes in there to apply the paint. It's kind of flexible, but it's still a little thicker piece of plastic. This is actually my favorite way to apply it. I have the best results with this. You can also use like a silicone brush, which you can pick up at like Hobby Lobby or any type of craft store, to apply the Dixie Mud as well. So that's another option. You can also apply with like, I've seen people apply with squeegees, all kinds of different methods like that. I find that it seems to me I'm able to do it faster and it goes on very quickly with this silicone brush. However, I have more bleed through underneath the stencil, which generally in a raised stencil that you're painting over, it doesn't really make a big difference because it's not something that's really evident once you paint. So what I think I'm going to do so that you guys can see the difference, I am going to do half the stencil with this and I will do the other side of the stencil with this brush. And then you can kind of decide which one you think works a little bit better. It is also more likely that you will have issues because you're constantly moving this around. You can't sit it in here flat, so that can also cause the stencil to be distorted a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and push this in, and like I said, I think I'm going to do this side over here with this, and then we'll move over to the other side. And I'm going to go ahead and take some of this out and just put it in the lid here so it's easy for me to grab. It's one thing I like about the stencil brush as well. I can get it all the way down in the bottom of the jar. But this little piece here doesn't go in all the way. So we're just going to take this here. And so now I want to press this down just as far as I can to get it flush with the side of my furniture piece. And I'm just going to start smearing this on. And like I said, I'm going to press this down as much as I can over near these edges. It's not going to be perfect. And I'm not bringing it all the way to the edge either. We're going to sand it down a bit so that it'll almost look like a fade into the center. So you want to be careful when you're pressing it back down, because again, it just doesn't go on here the same way necessarily. When you're having to move it around like this, it's going to be thicker near the edges because it's not flush with the piece. And we're going to keep going. If you do want it perfect, cut the stencil. You can still use the stencil going forward. It's just going to fit in these areas much better. You want to make sure that you try to keep your fingers out of the part that you're actually stenciling. This center is definitely going to look the best because that's the area where it's actually coming flush with your piece. So like I said, I'm just going to do half of this stencil with this tool, and then I'm going to use the silicone brush kind of show you how the other half turns out. We're going to bring this all the way down to the bottom. All right, I did that top a little bit with this. I had some excess on it. So now we're gonna move over and do this other side with our silicone brush here. And I'm just gonna scoop some on here. And we're gonna press this stencil back down. You wanna make sure that all the points are kind of lined up over here. I'm actually going to start in the middle because I do have an excess on my brush and I want it as light as possible up here where I'm going to have issues anyway. If you want it perfect, like I said, you do want to cut it out. And I consider doing that because honestly, cutting it out is my preferred method. This is a new stencil, so I do hate when I cut them up and they're brand new, but I felt like for this class that everyone may not want to cut their stencils up. So I wanted to show you when that wasn't something, I wanted to show it to you without cutting the stencil up. So this part we want to bend in here. You want to be careful when it's running off the side because you can just end up with a big blob over there. You want to bring it right back in so it lays and bends over that same spot. Which, for some reason, I'm a little bit off. My tape came off at the top. So I'm just carefully trying to center it over that same spot again. And we're just gonna bring this over, down. All right. And that's about as far over as we're gonna go there. So now we're gonna go ahead and take it off. And you can kind of get an idea of the difference. Now see how even this one over here is so nice and smooth when I use this tool that came from the stencil. And by the way, something like a thin, maybe not a credit card, that's a little bit thicker, but I'll bring you guys in so you can see this close up. But something really, like just not the credit cards, but when you get like a store card or like my Blue Cross and Blue Shield card is about the thickness of this. An old one of those is what I would use if I did not have this tool. This definitely creates the better raised stencil. You're going to see whenever I bring you in the difference between the two. So for cleaning this stencil as well, you don't want to wash this stuff down the drain. I can let this stuff dry on here. That's not a problem, or I can take it outside right now, but I spray mine off with the hose. In wintertime, I typically just use a bucket or a large pan, set my stencil in the large pan, and just spray it off really good with water. You just don't want to wash this stuff down your drain again. But it does come off very easily. I'm just going to go ahead and hang it back up here. So that I can clean it up later. And I'm going to bring you guys in, and I have the perfect example. But you're going to see how to kind of fix this and make it work on Wednesday night. So here is the raised stencil. And I don't know if you can tell, but this side where I use that little tool, that section right there is very nice and smooth already. There's not a lot of work I'm going to have to do to fix it. Now, if you look over here where I use that silicone brush, I still have the details and everything, but you see it's very like uneven as far as how it lays out the raised stencil part. So I will have to go in here and we'll have to do a little more sanding, which by the way, is super easy sanding, but we'll have to go in here and do a little bit more sanding in order to kind of make that look nice before we paint. But you can see how that raised stencil, is that not the most beautiful stencil? All right. And what we will do whenever we sand as well is we'll kind of bring it down and up so that it looks like it's just kind of faded out on the edges. Once you paint it, you won't even be able to tell those little errors. But like I said, you really can get a perfect raised stencil with this particular tool here, the Dixie mud, and if you cut it to size. I just wanted you to be able to see if you don't like to cut up your stencils. So that's that. We are ready to blend now. All right, so we're gonna move this around so that we're looking at the front. You guys, and since I have no one in this class watching this live, I probably only will do one coat on here, and then I'm gonna see if I can get some people in the group and I'll pop back on to do the second coat. And the reason I want to do it that way is because ideally it's better if you wait 1 to 2 hours in between the first and second coat in order to let your paint harden up slightly, not just be dry, but harden up a little bit more. when you're going back in with all that water and all that blending. That's not how I originally intended to run the class, but in this case, since I have so many people that somehow have not been added to the group or have not been able to get into the group, I'm not really sure. I hadn't heard back from anyone until just then. And like I said, I sent out reminder emails this morning. So there we go. Perfect. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start with the blending. And first, let me go ahead and just get my paint out. So we've got Tea Rose here. Actually, I think I'm just going to go ahead and take off the lid. It's just going to be easier to get this out here. So see, it's kind of this beautiful dusty pink color. Let me show you what that looks like. And then we're going to use buttercream, which is kind of this off-white, antique-y like color. So really pretty. It looks a little bit yellow whenever I'm putting it on camera here, but it's not. Does kind of have that eggshell undertone. We just want to stir this up pretty well. It's been a while since I've used this color. We're just going to throw a couple scoops here. All right, you guys. So a couple things. I guess I want to say a couple barriers to blending. And some of this comes from when I first started blending, how I was able to make it a little bit easier, as well as from some of the live classes I've done and seeing the different ways in which people paint. So there's a couple things that I want to say ahead of time before we get started. So from in-person classes, some of the barriers to learning how to blend and being successful at blending is the amount of paint that you put on your piece to blend with. So as we're going through this, we just want to pay special attention to how much paint we have on our brush whenever we start to blend. And I will show you along each step of the way what I'm putting on there. And the problem also is we're blending with chalk paint. Chalk paint dries very quickly. It's a water-based paint. Water-based paints dry quickly. So you have a short amount of work time to pull those colors together. So that's number two. And then how you are painting, I guess, would be the other situation. So I want to demonstrate really, really quickly that when you are painting and bringing your colors together, and I'll point this out once I start, I just want to point it out ahead of time so you're aware of it as you're watching. But you want to flick your wrist. So when you're putting on color, a lot of people will keep their wrist stationary and use their arm. And then when they're blending, they're doing the same thing. Well, that you can't quite get that small amount of space that you need to keep your colors all in one area with this method. So you want to flick your wrist. Flicking your wrist is going to be really important. And just think about that whenever you're painting. So, like I said, another one was how quickly your colors dry. So I don't do this now. You don't ever see me do it on a live, but I am going to do it for this. So if you have not blended before, this is your paint. It's a little bit thick, but it's not super thick. Add some water to it. It's going to extend out the dry time just a little bit. So it'll give you a little more time to make your paint workable. We will be using a mister bottle, which is how you generally see people blend and keep that paint wet. The difference is if I put the water in the paint, it slows the dry time all the way around. But when you're putting it on your piece and you're spraying, your paint is already starting to dry. This particular chalk paint dries from the inside out. So it's already starting to dry on the inside. You sprayed water on it. The only paint you're really moving around is the top coat. That bottom coat is starting to dry. And if you're taking too much time, you're actually starting to pull the paint back because you've got that bottom layer drying. So when you're new, and I used to do this whenever I was new. Oh, this is my water I'm drinking, but we'll add a little bit in. It's easier than misting it. Just add a little bit of water in. You can always add more, so don't add too much. Just a little bit at a time. You want to thin it out. So this paint covers really well. Your coverage will be a little bit less when it is watered down some, but it'll still be good enough to cover within 2 coats. You just want to make sure that you get this water stirred in really well. I probably should have poured this in a bigger slot here in my plate. So I'm going to move it over. And hopefully you guys can see me. I'm just stirring this up. All right, so now you can see my paint is quite a bit more watery than it was initially. I've actually accidentally mixed a little bit of it in with the pink, but that's okay. So again, I'm just going to drop a little bit of this water in with the pink or the tea rose, and we are going to stir that up. We just want to thin it out so we can get a little bit more work time. So now one other thing while I'm stirring this that makes a difference as well is the surface that you're blending on. So if you watch my lives, you will see a lot of time I am blending directly on wood. That is more difficult for that first coat to blend directly on wood. So if you're newer to blending, I would recommend, well, if you have a primer, if you've got Slick Stick, or if you have Boss down, if you have any type of primer down, it's going to be easier to blend, that's fine. But if not, I would highly encourage you to do just a coat of one color on your piece, because that is going to allow your paint. Really, a coat of silk is really nice because it's not too porous. It has a great surface for your paint to glide over and for you to work it without it pulling back. But even a coat of chalk paint is good. Just anything other than the wood. It's easier, your paint, when you're trying to blend, it's easier to pull back from wood. Once you get experience though, like I don't have to do this step anymore with watering down my paint. And as with anything, you get better with practice. So this is just one tip: water down your paint a little bit so that you've got a longer work time. Also, you want to pick the right brushes for the area that you are painting on. So these are small areas because you work in sections when you're blending, because you need to keep that paint wet and workable. It dries quick, so you're gonna break it off into sections. So our sections, so to speak, will be probably this drawer, this section right here, this section right here, this section. So that's 4 sections right there. And then I'll do these individually. So that'll be 5, 6 sections that we're going to be blending on. So we've got our watered down paint. You're going to want to pick a brush appropriate to that section. So these are great brushes, but they hold a ton of paint. And if you go back and watch the primer video, I really touched on that a lot. because it is so important how much paint you're putting on your piece. If you're putting a ton of paint on here, when you're using your blending brush to mix them together, you have so much paint on that blending brush that it's just literally mixing them together like it's one brand new color. And that's not what you want whenever you're blending. And by the way, there's a lot of different ways to blend, a lot of different styles of blending. I am focusing on the most popular blend that I get asked about, which is a nice, smooth, transitional blend. You're gonna wanna either have some shop towels or a lint-free, like cotton t-shirt, something lint-free, because you don't wanna transfer that lint from your brush back to your piece. Otherwise, your piece won't be smooth. And you'll have all kinds of little stuff stuck in the paint. So I use shop towels, lint-free shop towels. You're gonna want a brush for each color that you're using. So we're using 2 colors. I'm gonna stick with smaller brushes. I think I'm going to go with, this is a flat small. I'm actually not a huge fan of flat brushes, but most people are. So I'm gonna use a flat small for this. I'm a fan of round and oval brushes. So I'm also going to, actually, I think I'm going to use a round large for my buttercream. Actually, I'm going to switch that up. I'm going to use the flat because I think I'm going to do this with a little less buttercream and a little more tea rose. So my bigger brush is going to be for the tea rose. And then you're also going to want a blending brush. So my absolute favorite blending brush, even for small areas, is the mini. So you can see, I think this is either a 1.5 or a 2-inch brush. I would have to measure it, but it's a pretty large flat brush here. I do like the oval medium sometimes for blending as well. And by the way, these are all synthetic brushes. We're using synthetic brushes because it's going to lend itself to a brush-free finish. This paint, chalk mineral paint, is self-leveling. So that's going to help as it dries get out some of those brush strokes, but you want to use a good brush. If you are using like a natural bristle brush like this, you use this when you want brush strokes. It's not going to give you that smooth finish. Just depends on what you want there. So the first layer of your blending is to lay out the color. I like to blend because I think it's easier when I apply my second coat. If my first coat is blended, it just seems to meld together a little bit better and I don't have to do an extra coat. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I also have my mister bottle. The reason I have this, I use it a lot on the second coat. On the first coat, I usually don't use it on my piece too much unless I feel my paint start to pull. My brushes that I apply paint with, I like to wet those down nicely. Because again, that's just another method, just like adding water to the paint. This is just another method to help my paint stay workable a little bit longer. Now, I do not like, my blending brush has a different purpose. So I like this to be dry. I like to keep it nice and dry for as long as I can. It will pull your paint colors together better and muddy them up less if this brush is dry. So we are going to want our pink on the outside here. So because of the area I'm going in, I'll probably leave this pretty much all pink up here. I'm kind of working that paint in, but when we get to our blending parts, I am going to slap this paint on. I am not trying to brush it out or anything else. I want it thick and chunky. I'm not using a ton of paint, but I want the paint that I do have on here not brushed out. So remember, I'm using a small brush. If you're using a larger brush than this, absolutely do not put this much paint on your brush. And I'm just going to move this over. Just move it all the way over, almost to come right in line with my pink. Just put a little bit more on here. Just want it laid out like this. All right, so now, let me pop you guys up a little bit. Now I'm gonna bring these colors together. So for this step, I want my blending brush. I'm gonna bring you guys in some. Usually you don't wanna take very long on this. I would normally go right into painting this, but for the purposes of this video, I'm slowing it down a little bit. Because the faster you go, the better off you are. So I'm going to start right here with the, you guys are reversed, but the right side of my brush is on the pink, the left side is on the buttercream. And I am going to start, notice I am moving my wrist. I'm going to start, I'm not moving my wrist now, I'm going to just start bringing these colors together. What I am doing is moving my wrist like this. So just a little cross hatch with my wrist just to get those colors together. And I am also moving my brush around so that my pink is always on the one side and my buttercream is always on the other side. Now again, you can, at this point I've developed quite a bit of paint that is staying on my brush. So I'm going to use my towel here and just wipe it off so my brush has no loose paint. And we're going to start spreading this out again. And again, I'm keeping that pink side with the pink side. And so I'm going around like this. I'm just bringing those colors together. This is a small area, so it's super easy. Now I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to start smoothing my paint together, bringing it all together. Smoothing it out. I don't want any clumps of paint. And I'm just using the excess paint on here to get into these grooves. Just get all the way around this. I don't want to do this after I've blended because otherwise I'm going to start dragging my paint in places I don't want it. All right, so now that that's done, I'm going to go over the middle of this and I'm going to start really smoothing it out. Again, this is just my first coat. It's not going to be perfect. Do you see when I'm doing this? I am moving my wrist and I'm flicking like in an X pattern. This is bringing my paint all together. All I'm doing is X, X, X. If I start to see that I'm pulling too much pink down here, that's when it's time for me to wipe this off. So I'm still just bringing everything together and I'm feathering lightly. There is no, I'm not scrubbing. My bristles are barely flicking over. But every time I'm brushing, this is the motion. Flick the wrist, back and forth. Flick of the wrist. Okay, so this is a pretty good blend for my first coat. I'm happy with this. So excess paint off. I am just very lightly. Can you see how lightly this is? I'm going to bring you in on this angle so you can literally see. Now my paint is starting to pull. But you see how light that is? I am feathering. All I'm doing is feathering out any brush strokes that are going in those directions I was taking it. And I'm just all I'm doing is smoothing out my paint so I can have that gorgeous, smooth finish. That's it. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring you guys back because we're going to work on the rest of this. You guys were doing great on time as well. So now we're going to do these sections over here. And again, I am going to spray my brush. Let me maybe back over so you can see the whole thing. spray my brush so it's nice and wet. I actually still have a little bit of paint on my brush. Spray both brushes. You want to keep these nice and wet. And there's really not going to be any blending through here, so I'm just going to come on with my Tea Rose and just make sure that I'm getting good coverage. I will pull this drawer out once it's dry and paint the inside, so we might do that probably live tonight. All right. Now I'm going to take my buttercream. I just want to give this a little bit of highlight. So all I'm doing, I want to bring you guys in. All I am doing is tapping the side of my brush to release a little bit of this buttercream on that highlighted area. See that? Just very, very little. Now I'm going to take my blending brush right here. I'm going to wipe it so I can make sure I don't have any excess paint on there. This is the brush, and I'm just going to lightly, see how lightly that is? See that flick of the wrist? Look how that's working. Just going to lightly feather across here so I can have a highlight. This is just a little bit of tinting, shading, just a little highlight. And that's going to distinguish it from this area in here. As you go on and you continue to do stuff like this, that is what's going to give your piece so much dimension. And you guys, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff to this piece right here. I usually don't paint in pink, but pretty excited about this piece. All right, again, spray the brushes. You want to keep those nice and wet. Also, if your paint is starting to dry up, which mine's not, but if it is, spray your paint. It does dry quickly. So here, I'm going to take my Tea Rose, and I just want to kind of get under this area right here. And really, so I also see where I have a coverage issue here. This first coat is where to address this. Definitely on the first coat. I'm going to get around my hinges over here. All right, so I'm going to spray my brushes again. I've got a little buildup of paint right there. I just want to smooth that out. Like, you can go when you see different areas. I skip around. I tend to skip around a lot when I paint. When you see different areas you missed or whatever, just you can lightly, or if you have like a lump of paint there that you didn't smooth out while you were blending, just go over that area and lighten it up. So like I said, the key to this is just keeping my brushes nice and wet. So let's see, for this, let's go ahead and come out here with the Tea Rose. Let's bring it over here. I don't want this center section dark as well. I'm not really smoothing my paint out. I'm really just making sure that I'm getting coverage. You know, when you get all these little indents, sometimes it's a little bit harder to make sure the paint gets in all those areas. But, and by the way, this is about how much paint that I am, see, just the very tips of my bristles are in paint. And look how much that is. I'm just going to go down this way, across the top over here, bring that in. Let's really get into these grooves. I don't want a lot of paint in this section, otherwise it'll just end up all pink. I'm going to smooth some of these outer areas, because I think I'm going to do maybe just a little highlight on those spots. All right, so we're going to come in with our buttercream now, which is still pretty nice and watery. And I've just got, you can see I've got a little bit more of the buttercream on here because this is going to go over this entire section. I'm not smoothing it all the way out. I'm just laying it on. I'm going to tell you, you can add more paint easier than you can remove paint. So definitely, I want to highlight some of this too, which means it's not going to be buttercream. All I'm doing is kind of laying this down here. Maybe I want to highlight some of these edges. Just put a little bit on like that. Now it's time for our blending brush. First thing I always do is make sure that my blending brush is as dry as possible with any excess paint off of it. And let's go ahead and do these areas up here. This is just a highlight, so I'm just kind of blending it in a little bit, smoothing all this out. And it's a very subtle highlight. I might want to highlight it more the second time because this is really where you are just laying out your colors. I just like to blend at this stage. So this is important. Let me bring you guys down and in. I want you to be able to see really up close. This is something you don't get on the live videos. So here we go. I'm gonna lay my paintbrush this way and I am going to twist it. I'm gonna make sure that that is always on the outside. I'm gonna show you what happens in the next section if you don't do that. So my pink is always on the outside, always on the outside. I'm kind of hitting and highlighting while I'm rolling it around this spot. But see, this is all my wrist. My wrist is going. If you're only moving your arm, it's just you can't get that flow. You can't bring those colors together the same. So the trick is flipping the wrist. All right, so now I don't want to make this all totally pink in the center. It's going to have a pink tint to it. So I want to get all this excess paint off of my blending brush. And see how much excess I'm getting off? I have never even put paint on this brush. All right, so now keep it light. I'm just gonna flick this up and down. I'm gonna wipe off my brush and I'm gonna flick it across. And I'm gonna keep doing that in the direction I'm looking at where I want my paint to move. So for example, I see that my pink just isn't in with my white quite right. You probably can't see this on camera, but I wanna loosen that up. So I really just wanna feather, feather, feather. You see I'm barely touching this, barely touching. So now I'm gonna go up and down and I'm gonna go across, just light feather. My objective isn't really to move the paint. It's more so to just smooth it out, minimize any of those brush strokes so I have a nice, beautiful, smooth finish. And again, this is only the first coat. Second coat is much easier, I think. All right. So there we go. Actually, I'm gonna bring you back in. So sorry, we're just going on a little ride here. So on this side over here, I'm gonna do the same thing, but I'm gonna show you, this is my first coat, so it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna show you what happens if you just start going like this and moving it all around, you're just gonna end up with like one color. So again, when we start, we want our paint to be super watery, so spray down those brushes really, really well. And now we are going to just put the paint on. We're not really smoothing it out. We are just, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna wanna open these cabinet doors in a minute too, because I'm gonna end up with a paint line on the inside of these cabinet doors that I don't want. So let's get this coverage on here all the way around. Okay, so I've got this spot in here that I really need to get into. I'm gonna hold my brush so that I'm forcing it together into a little line. Barely dip the bristles. And I'm gonna get into this little spot right here and just roll it down. And that's it. So now I'm just going for coverage here. Again, this isn't the blending part. This is just getting coverage. That's gonna be enough pink to take me, should be enough pink to take me all the way in. Might need to add a little just around the edges. There we go. I'm gonna smooth this out a little because I just want that, all we want is the highlight up there. All right, so now I've got my other brush. I'm just gonna come in, tap a few highlights up here. I might not have done this on the other side, but especially on this first coat, I really like to play with how I want to lay everything out. This is the coat to experiment with. Let's put a little bit there. Now we're going to put some right inside this section here. So this time I'm not going to go around with my blending brush and do that to keep my colors separate. I'm just going to bring them together. And I don't always do that, but if you're starting to blend, that's really the best way to do it. So if I don't blend my colors around and I don't keep my brush that way, I'm just kind of taking everything together. And you can see I don't have a significant variation in color. There's just a change in tone. And you might like this better. This is creating a gorgeous highlight, but it's almost like it's just one color on the inside. It's not like you have that separation of color. So you can see, I mean, definitely how that makes a difference, because you're just muddying up your colors when you don't necessarily keep it in that, keep the pink on its side and kind of go around. But you guys can really see the difference here of how it looks. This one is quite a bit darker because I've really just created a new color of pink here in the middle. This one, I still have the buttercream in the middle. Then I've got the shading out to the tea rose. So that's one big thing I see in class is people not turning their brush, so they're keeping their pink on the one side and their other color, well, in this case, the buttercream on the other side. So that's definitely, and once you start blending a lot, you will do this without thinking. You're not going to be thinking. You're just going to be looking at your colors and how you want them to come together. All right, so down here we have this mold that we attached, which I really hope it shouldn't be crooked, but for some reason, maybe it's just the angle. It looks crooked. Anyway, so whenever you are first starting, I like to really start adding my depth already into the details. So what I do anytime I have any molding, or in this case, like, you know, indents like this that I really want to bring out, really create a 3D effect on, I take my darkest color. I use a French tip brush, so this is dyed blue on the end, but it's no paint on it. So this is a French tip, and it's a natural bristle brush, but it has this nice little, see that nice little tip on there? So you can really work into these type of areas like this. So we're actually going to start with the molding. I do spray this brush down too, and in this case, I also spray the molding because this is a very detailed molding. The water is going to help, it's going to thin the paint a little bit and really help it sink down into the molding here. So now that I've got all of that paint worked down into the details, I'm going to go ahead and put on my paint as I would normally. Actually, before I do that, I want to open this cabinet door, or this drawer here. Or sorry, the cabinet door. I just needed this out of the drawer. And I want to make sure I don't have any big buildup of paint down here. You just kind of have to be watchful of those areas. You don't want a large buildup of paint because then you're going to run into a situation where you've got too much paint. It's going to rub and then it's going to distress. So I did not have that buildup. The inside of this, I am not going to blend. I will do a video of when I paint it, but it's not, I don't intend for it to be blended. Let me go ahead and put this in back up here. You guys see how great the coverage is with this primer, this white primer underneath of it? It's fantastic. All right, so I am going to go in and do these grooves as well. It doesn't matter if this dries. This is not for the purposes of blending. I am doing this because at the end, when your piece is finished, all these little details in here, all the little grooves, all the little lined out sections, this creates a lot of dimension. And I mean, we're going to end up lining these out anyway. That'll be our last day when we do all of our shadowing and stuff. But it really starts at the beginning. And you also want to make sure that you have coverage in these because it's not always easy to get into these details that are lined out here. But you just want to make sure you have that good coverage. So that's another reason that I do this. You don't want to get to the end, you have a perfect blend, and then you realize, you know, some area doesn't have paint in some little small detailed section. So you guys, we're going to actually tackle this one Wednesday night, right before we start to blend. But you can see some of the issues with the stencil here, but you're going to see how that doesn't matter, and I'm going to show you how to fix this. But that's just a little preview of what we're going to be doing on Wednesday. So again, I just want to get all of these details in here. Most of this is just going to be a highlighted effect on the feet down here. I'm going to turn this side around. I've got this thing balanced out, so when I'm spinning it, some of these are going away. Let me bring you over, yeah, so you can see this section. So I'm keeping this brush nice and wet so that this paint is nice and thin, so it'll just slip right into these grooves. These grooves, any of these French provincial pieces, the feet are really like the hardest to get. And you guys, this is next to no paint that I am using here. All right, perfect. So we're gonna slide this all the way back to the front, and we're gonna do this section right here with our blending. So we haven't used our blending brushes in a minute here, so we're just gonna spray those, make sure they're nice and wet. And we've got our tea rose. And let's see, this, first of all, we want to just be pink. So we're just gonna lay this out. That coverage up there. I want to come around the edges. I'm just laying it on thick. Come right down the edge there. I'm going to spread a little bit of that out. And I'm going to keep this bottom dark and pink as well. All right, so I really just want to take a look at how much paint that is. Not a whole lot. Like I said, you can always add more paint. It's harder to take it off. So I'm going to highlight that, and then I'm going to take some of this and I'm just going to run it over the top of this emblem. I want this to be highlighted. I just want those grooves to be pink. And we're going to go ahead and take any excess that I have left. I need a little bit more. And we're going to run it right across this edge here. Just a little bit across this part. And this isn't always necessary in the first coat, those little highlights, but it helps me know where I want them to be on the second coat. It's very subtle. So we're just going to wipe off our blending brush. Now, I want these to be highlighted. So I don't want to drag all my paint exactly everywhere. So I'm going to do this part a little bit different, and I'm going to run my brush more so in a circle here. Once I have it brought together a little bit, I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm going to feather, 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 feather. Just taking a few of those in there. Feather, feather, feather. That's all I'm doing. I just want this to be a little bit highlighted, and that's it. So that's it. So same thing over here. We're going to circle, circle, circle. I'm even going to bring some up in here. It's not going to get into the grooves. I think just the excess on my brush, give this a little highlight down here. Now, all I'm doing now is just flicking my wrist and bringing that paint together more. So it looks like a little highlight. For this part up here, same thing. I'm actually keeping my wrist pretty straight. I'm just feathering, 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 feathering over the top to kind of smooth it together. So again, this is only the first coat. Now, I want this to be highlighted some more. So I'm going to take that brush, put a little bit of paint on it. I'm going to wipe it back some, and I'm going to lightly highlight this. This I am not going to blend over again. I want a little bit more. And I just want to highlight some of this raised detail. So all I'm doing is very lightly, there's no wrist flicking going on here. It's still wet, so it's still giving me a couple different colors in here, not just this pure buttercream. I'll do this when it dries also. But I am just lightly highlighting that. You want these things to have lots of dimension, really, really stand out. Okay, so this part is done. Now we just want to get the legs, which that's super easy because we're really just doing some highlighting here. So let's go ahead and since we've got this part up, let's start with this leg over here on this side. I just want to see what you can see. So first of all, we want to get back in here, and that's just all going to be pink. We're not going to be blending underneath of it. And I'm going to leave this whole foot pretty much pink. I might do some highlights on it, but you know, the feet are normally your darker colors. I'm just getting the back here. And most of this is just the excess paint on my brush. Now we are going to go ahead and do what we want to do to blend. So again, just keep these brushes nice and wet. And by the way, I like this door much better. I don't know about you guys, but this is just a highlight. This is the one where we kept our colors separate. This is what I think I'm actually going to go with on the last step. You guys, I forgot there was no one there. I'm so used to people being on my lives. This is the first live I've ever had. But again, no one was in the group that purchased the class. So I sent a reminder email. I didn't get any emails back until, of course, while we were live. All right, so I'm going to take this Tea Rose, and actually let me pop you up so you can see the whole section. And under here, you generally want it to be darker under the tops. I'm going to get just that line down there too while I'm at it. On the top, you know, like where you would normally have a shadow there. And then maybe in a groove, like right down here along the edge. And I am repainting over that because, of course, that's dry now, where I painted that originally. But again, I'm going for coverage here. That's what this is all about. I'm just painting that back section. You'll see that tomorrow. And I am kind of trying to keep it over a little bit because I have this area that's done. When I do the second coat, I do tend to do it a little bit differently because you do have these overlapped areas and that's going to happen, but normally you just do a little bit of dry brushing. We're just going to move this around to the side here. Want that pink over here. And bring it up a little bit more. Perfect. So now we're just going to kind of highlight this side a little bit with the buttercream. And you can go over areas that have that, you don't have to stop at just the area you left blank. And I want this part of the, now notice I am blending out or laying out my paint a little bit more. It's not as gloppy there. And then probably bring this pink right up here. This is a smaller area though, so the paint is going to tend to come together more because it's more paint. So make sure this is dried off. And then we are just going to, again, I want this to be a highlight though. So this is that situation where I'm bringing the dark side of my brush around. I'm not bringing that side with the pink on it over the whole thing. I'm just, because I want that to be a highlight. Or not just a highlight, I want it to actually be a separate color. So my brush is just going around in a circle. I'm gonna wipe off that excess. And then I'm gonna feather over. So it's a little bit smooth and not as, but I wanna keep that color separate. So I don't wanna bring that too much of that pink up. So that's perfect. I love how that is highlighted right there. And then we're gonna come up here. And this is a small area. I've got a larger brush here. I'm really just trying to highlight this. It doesn't, fine with it pulling those together more so. Just gonna kind of really mix them in, go back and forth. And then now this is the super light, got a little hair. Let me get that out. So if I hadn't been able to get that hair right out then, I could go back once this dries with a super fine grit sandpaper, just sand that spot out and it'll come off. So that's it. So now you have this side highlighted. You got the beautiful little highlight on the foot. And we're just gonna spin it around now to the other side and get that done. So by the way, see where I kind of didn't get in here, over here, I kind of missed a little bit. Now is the time to fix that on this first coat, because when you go back in with this second coat, you're gonna want your blend to really, whoops, my art brush just fell apart. I just got an art brush out because, well, we're gonna skip that one. I have paint all over me now. Let me just grab another quick one. I don't really want a good brush. I just need a brush that's small, a little art brush. I'm gonna put a little pink on it here. And I kind of missed this edge along here. I'm just gonna put the paint in there so I have that coverage. I'm gonna keep it nice and smooth though. Just make sure it's all smoothed out. And come right in there. So I pretty much got everything else. I've got another little spot over here that I'm gonna get. There we go, perfect. And then we are going to spin over to this leg and take care of it. So this has already dried on here, this other pink that I put on. So I'm gonna end up going over those spots. Well, some of them. So again, we get to the next area. We're just gonna mist our brushes down really well. This is really only for the first coat. When we put the second coat on, it's gonna be different. We got 15 minutes, you guys, so we're perfect on the timing. So we are just gonna take this tea rose in, make sure here that I have gotten all the spots for the coverage. So I didn't spin this one around and get in that hole, but I just did it with this brush here. And I am overlapping into this area we're not going to paint right now, because right now it's going to be easier for me to make sure that these details are covered than when I'm doing a second coat, because that second coat you're going to want to be more careful about where your excess paint and stuff like that is going. So I just want to do that and spread that out so it doesn't create any lumps. Okay, so now we're putting it on again from a blending perspective. That was just coverage there. Especially down in these grooved areas, you'll find places that you've missed, even on the second coat. Just making sure I've got all of that. Okay, now we're putting it on for blending. I'm gonna go ahead and wet my brush again, because I want my paint that goes on to move around. I want that to be nice and wet. All right, so let's go ahead and start here. Go ahead and just run this up the side. Put some right over there. Let's run some up this side. I need a little bit more there. So, you know, all I'm doing is tipping out my brush in the paint. You're not actually dunking your brush in a lot of paint here. Just want to make sure that I do have enough pink on here to kind of blend. We're gonna want that to be a darker section down there in that indent. And that's about exactly what we want here. So I'm gonna take, whoops. I'm gonna take this, we're gonna just run it down. I don't want it quite too much of that up there. And then we're gonna put this right where we want it to be, nice and bright on that raised part. I didn't do this on the other side, but I think I wanna give this foot a little bit of a highlight here. See how that looks. All right, so now we're gonna come in with our blending brush again. And again, on the foot, I don't want it to come together too much, so I'm going to be cautious about how I am running my brush around to bring my paint colors together. Got half in the pink, half in the white, and I'm just going to circle it around. Just being conscious of where that is at. Kind of bring it together nice and soft. And now that I've gotten that kind of nice and soft, I just want to feather it out. I've taken off the excess paint that I picked up here. And just want to make sure it's a nice little transition to that area, which gives it a gorgeous little highlight. This, again, we're just going to kind of blend this together. I just want this to be a highlight. It doesn't need to be a completely separate color. If you feel like your colors are coming together more than you want them to, that's when it's time to wipe your brush off. Got a little excess paint in there. I just pulled it off with my blending brush on the corner, and that is it. So that is our first coat of blend. On the front section here, so I'm just gonna get this little foot down here, that little highlight I gave it, I forgot to kind of blend that out, but that just lightens that up to a lighter shade of pink from this tea rose. So that's it. That's our first coat of the blend. Definitely like the store better, but I'm really happy with how this is turning out. And like I said, tomorrow, actually, I am going to go ahead and do, we've got 12 minutes. I'm going to end up doing the second coat on this drawer, but before I do that, we are going to pull it out. I want you to really see every step of this live. I have not cleaned out the inside of that drawer yet. So up here, what I typically like to do, let me make sure you have the right angle on this. Okay, so you can kind of see in here. So this drawer sits inside. So what I really like to do at this point is to just use an artist brush, wet it down a little bit because you want to keep this paint very, very thin. But you want the colors to kind of line up and match. So I'm just taking my tea rose and I'm putting a super thin coat of this on here. So that way when the drawer is in, you don't see like a line where, you know, it turns to wood, or in this case, primer. You want it slightly painted in, so as the drawer sits, it is in the right spot. I like to do this after the first coat, but before the second coat, because sometimes you'll get a little excess paint that'll go out and it might mess up, you know, the shading or the blending that you have.
Here's what I found.
And this way, oops, Siri's talking to me. This way you can see what color it needs to be based on the first coat of paint that you've put on. And you don't want an excessive buildup in here anyway, so I just normally leave it at one coat with a good coverage inside there. Also, this is the point at which I like to do the lip. So the lip of my drawer here, like I said, I haven't cleaned out the inside of the drawer yet, and I'm probably going to end up decoupaging it because it does have a pretty big stain. I might be able to sand it out, but I'll probably just paint the inside of the drawer and decoupage it. So again, this is the step at which I like to do this stage of the drawer. I tell you what, if I don't have good coverage though, I see later after I've done the second coat, what I actually do, the trick, the workaround to that is to protect your front section. And after you protect your front section, then come in and do this. And then you can just take a baby wipe and wipe it right off the first coat. Or I mean the second coat. You can just wipe whatever went over off with the baby wipe. It won't affect that first coat of paint and you're all set. But that's it. So we've got this done, and I'm actually going to go ahead and do a second coat on this drawer because like I said, tomorrow live on the Dixie Belle Paint Company page, I am going to be doing the pinstriped, well, it's stripes outlined in a pinstripe. So I'm going to kind of, let me actually just push this all the way in. I really like to give that a little bit of time to dry before I start running the drawer over it. Let me bring you guys back up. Sorry about that. There we go. So we're going to actually go ahead and do the second coat. I did this drawer first, so yeah, it should be dry enough for me to get that second coat on. I'm going to kind of keep it away from these sides because I only want to do the second coat on the drawer. I grabbed the wrong mister bottle. So when you're doing the second coat, you do want to spray that down. I think I actually may have put too much water on there, especially since this is so fresh. But we are just going to take our tea rose and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to pretty much lay my paint out on there and go around here, make a little line kind of at the top. I'm going to go ahead and second coat this section up here as well. Lay that out. So notice this time I'm not spraying my brushes. I put my water on my piece. This paint is exceptionally porous. So you want this second coat to just glide right over it. So I've got this on. And I'm actually going to come in with a fresh blending brush because I am doing my second coat. I'm still using it, the mini. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to be cautious about what edge I have where. And I'm gonna just run this around here like this. I am picking up quite a bit of excess paint here, you guys, and that's okay. I'm flicking my wrist, very small motions right here, because that paint really needed to come together. I'm basing it on my project, how much I'm flicking. Okay. So I'm gonna get all that excess off here. I'm gonna bring you guys in so you can really see. Get all that excess off. You can see this is the dark side of my brush. That's the light side. I just want to make sure that I keep that together. And see how easy the second coat blends? It actually blends easier than the first coat because it's gliding across that paint. Some excess pink over here. I'm just kind of bringing that in. This is not my second coat. This is just how I'm getting rid of that excess paint, that excess T-rose I had on the side. Bringing that together. Now I want to get all this excess off. And I'm going to start flicking over like this. Go up on this section. So I want to really accent that curve. And your blend, by the way, does not have to be perfect, especially since I am doing stripes over this section. Everything, I don't even really need to spend this much time on here, but I want to show you guys how to do this coat if you weren't going to be doing anything over it. But your blend is enhanced anytime that you put a transfer, stripes, anything like that over it. We're just gonna lightly feather now. My brush is barely touching the piece, and the purpose of this is not to drag paint together. It is just simply to smooth out any brush strokes. I'm not really moving my paint at this point. That all happened in the beginning. I'm going to take my brush though. I just want to go along, make sure everything's smooth. I don't have any extra paint drops or whatever the case is. So since this is my second coat on the top, I do want to, by the way, I still have some excess paint on here. I just want to wipe that off. I want to go and just put a very, very slight highlight here. And maybe just across the middle a little bit over here. This is going to be more enhanced. This highlight is on my raised area. When we get to the final shading and stuff like that, I'm going to bring in and line out those dipped areas. So it's going to further add to the dimension of this. So now I've got my blending brush, and I don't want to blend this in. I just want to soften it. So it's still here, it's just a little bit softer. So it's a very subtle highlight. I'm gonna bring you guys in. Hopefully you can see how that looks, but that's the second coat. And we are gonna do the first and second coat on the side. See that little subtle highlight, like right there? I'm not sure, it's still wet, so you're getting a glare from the lights, but you'll definitely be able to see it when we come back on Wednesday night. Like I said, I will be posting the stripes into the group, but if not, you can join me on the Dixie Belle Paint Company page live tomorrow. If anyone sees this by tomorrow, hopefully they do. But all right, thank you so much for watching this, and I hope to see everyone live Wednesday night. Bye-bye.